You're listening to the Business Wealth Impact Podcast, your source for empowering information and cutting-edge ideas from the world's top minds. I'm your host, Jeanne Amlour, founder of seven-figure coaching company, Jeanne Amlour International. Join me on a journey to unleash your potential and create your highest success. Welcome to Business Wealth Impact. Hello, and welcome to Business Wealth Impact. Today we have Mark Hicks as our guest. Mark is an author, ghostwriter, speaker, counselor, and relationship specialist. He's the author of the book, Learning Love, Building a Life That Matters and Healthy Relationships That Last. In it, he gives practical guidance to building a happy life, healthy family, and thriving career. Very welcome, Mark.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, me too. I'm glad you're here. So, first of all, what are you a doctor in?
I have a doctorate in ministry. I've come from a theological background. I also have a master's degree in divinity. And in addition to that, I come from a counseling background. I have a master's degree in mental health counseling and have worked in as a therapist and counselor in various capacities as well. So really a two-track career in both counseling and in theology.
Okay, wonderful. And then you got into the whole relationship thing and wrote this book. So tell us a little bit more about the book.
Yeah, I really got into this because it was really a three-path road that led me here. Counseling, of course, we deal a lot with relationships, either the relationship with ourselves, relationship with others, whether it be at home, at work, in our neighborhoods. Relationships impact our lives, obviously. And so a lot of
Mm,
counseling centers around that. From a theological standpoint, it's about relationships, relationship with ourselves, relationship with others, relationship with God. But then there's my personal aspect to my life that I didn't always know what I know now. And early in my life, even though I came from a healthy, happy childhood and family, I ended up in a very toxic first marriage that was a terrible experience and ended in divorce. And from that, I really began to question, is love even possible? Is it just luck that some people happen to find
mm,
it and some people don't? And from those questions and from my counseling experience, from my theological experience, all of that kind of led to this understanding eventually that love really is possible, that there
mm,
are ways that we can build love because love is a learned skill set. That our mistake is thinking
mm,
that it's luck or that it's serendipity in some way. And even if we come from a healthy family, sometimes we are lulled into the idea that, it happens for everybody. Look at my family, it was easy.
mm,
And so we
mhm,
start to think that it will just happen naturally. In reality, love is
mhm,
a learned skill set. And this is love in
mhm,
every area, whether it be in our marriage or romantic relationships, family, friendships, coworkers. Now, obviously, the relationship you have with your spouse is different than you have with your coworker, but the foundational components to build those relationships is the same. And so,
mm,
if we begin to understand what love is and what relationships really are about, we can build a great life at home, in our personal life, in our workplaces, in every area of life.
mm. Okay, now how did you come up with this?
It was really over time, and the inspiration comes from my theological background. There are 5 books of what's called wisdom literature in the Old Testament of Scriptures. The
Hmm.
books are Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Song of Solomon. And as I began to read those books, I was always kind of interested in that section of the scripture. And so as I
Hmm.
read those, themes began to emerge. And what I began to see is while it's called the wisdom literature, really love is our greatest wisdom. If we understand love,
Hmm.
we understand life, we understand people,
Mm,
we understand ourselves. And so as I began to see the themes emerge, the inspiration really came from that. The five components of love are really based on those 5 books of the wisdom literature. So I didn't just make this up.
mm,
It's been around for thousands of
mhm,
years. Now, some people see
mm,
the Bible as holy literature and from God, and I have always held that as well. But I do respect that not everyone understands it that way. I respect that,
mhm,
but I hope that people will see that these are still ideas that have been passed down for generations, for thousands of years. This
mm,
is ancient wisdom, whether you see it as holy or not. It is still ancient
mhm.
wisdom that's been passed down to us, and that was the inspiration behind those 5 components of love.
Fantastic. Okay, so what are the five components again?
The five components of love, the first one sort of surprises people. It's grief,
Mhm.
because
Mm.
no one gets through this life without scars. Everyone's going to be hurt on occasion. And when we are, there is a tendency, an instinct to start putting up emotional barriers, to put up walls, to keep people at arm's length, to protect ourselves. And that makes sense,
Mhm.
but it doesn't actually
Mm.
work. It actually hurts us more because we are
Mm.
pushing those relationships that we want and need out of our life. We're keeping our distance from people when we actually want to draw closer to them. Grief,
Mhm.
although it's painful, is a healer. It's our comeback story. It's the way to stay
Mhm.
engaged even in the pain of life. There are some things
Mm.
that are so painful that it's like it leaves a hole in our heart. But what I always
Mhm.
say is you can live a really good life with a hole in your heart. And if people
Mhm.
begin to understand that and know that there's a way back, even though there's not a way to fix the past, if you come from a dysfunctional family, you've been through a divorce, you've been through trauma, and you've been hurt, you can't fix that, but you can go on to live a really good life, even with that hole in your heart, even with emotional scars. We can live a good life anyway. And that comes through the process of grief. So, grief is that first component that keeps us in the game, it keeps us engaged, keeps us connected, and building those relationships that we want.
Mm. Okay. What's the second one then?
The second component is emotion.
Okay.
That's the one everyone knows. That's the one everyone expects. This is the sweet, beautiful part of love where we have those emotional connections. That's what all the rom-com movies are about, is that emotional connection. And that is a beautiful thing. And it comes very naturally for some people. And I don't need to say anything about it for some people because they know how to do that.
Mm.
But for others, emotional connection is harder. Some people are more introverted, they're more cerebral, it doesn't come as naturally, they have difficulty sharing emotion. And if you've been through those tough times where you've been hurt, it can be more difficult. Even if
Mm.
you've been through that grief process and are ready to engage, it's a little more difficult to share your emotions. And for those people, I say it's a practice.
Mm.
Start small.
Mhm.
Like every other thing in life, you can learn it. Just
Mhm.
start small. The important thing is the people in your life you care about need to know you care about them.
Mm.
And so learn to say, I love you. And if
Mm.
you just can't say that because maybe you came from an abusive background where love was used as a weapon,
Mm.
then don't say it.
Mm.
Say things like, I appreciate you, or just sincerely say thank you if someone does something nice. Those words matter.
Mm.
Let people know you care about them if you care about them and in the way you do. Again, it's different at home than at work, but people at work need to know you appreciate them as well.
Mm.
Say that you appreciate them. Let them know when you appreciate what they've done. And so when we learn how to have those emotional connections with people, it brings us together. Those are
Mm.
the things that bring our relationships together and bond us as people, as families, as coworkers, as friends.
Mhm.
Now, the third component is a balancing element. That's practicality. Emotion brings us together, practicality keeps us together. These are the decisions we make every day to live together well. You might have heard someone say, I love them, but I can't live with them. Those are people that have an emotional connection. They've done well with the second component,
Mm.
but they've not done well with the third component of love, practicality.
Mhm.
They have not lived well together.
Mhm.
These are things like the financial decisions we make at home in our marriages. Who's going to make those financial decisions and how?
Mhm.
How or is one person in charge of the money, or are we doing it as a team?
Mhm.
Parenting decisions, household chores, how we communicate with people at home and at work. Communication is a learned skill set. And so when we learn to communicate well, then we can help build those relationships, make those decisions in a good way. And one of the most important practical elements is to understand some relationships have to end. And
Mhm.
that's very difficult. And so
Mhm.
people are surprised to hear me say that sometimes because I come from a theological background, because I'm a counselor, because I'm a relationship coach. People think, oh, well, you think every relationship can be saved.
Mm.
Theoretically, it can.
Mhm.
If everyone's practicing these five components of love and everyone wants to save the relationship and everybody's good people. Unfortunately, that's not always the case. There
Mm.
are abusers out there. There
Mhm.
are toxic people in the world.
Mm.
And so we have to recognize that. And if we want healthy relationships, we have to make room for them by ending some of those that are unhealthy dysfunctional, toxic, or abusive. And that takes us back to the first component, which is grief,
Mm.
because that's going to cause a grief process if we go through a divorce. Even if it's a relief to be away from that person, you still lost the dream. You still
Mhm.
lost what you worked for.
Mm.
If you have to separate yourself from your parents because they are so toxic and abusive, that's going to be painful because you wished for more.
Mhm.
And so we're back to grief, that first component, to come back from that. But ending those relationships gives us the opportunity to have healthy ones. And so it allows us to have those emotional connections on a healthy way when we make those very practical decisions.
Mm.
Now, the fourth component is acceptance. And this is twofold. We have to accept people because nobody's perfect. We're not going to find that perfect person. Now, that doesn't mean we accept abuse. Abuse is never allowed.
Mhm.
But when people make mistakes, we have to live with that. But that's a minor part of acceptance. The major part is accepting ourselves. We
Mm.
have to learn to love ourselves. Brene Brown's done some great research on this, some great writing. Other people have as well, but she's the most noted. Wonderful stuff that she's written. You cannot love other people more than you love yourself.
Mm.
That's the limit. And
Mhm.
people get very confused on this because they think if I get people to love me, it'll validate me and then I can love myself.
Mm.
That has a certain level of logic to it, but it doesn't actually work in real life.
Mhm.
We have to love ourselves first, and that becomes the limit. So if you want to love your spouse more, you want to love your children more, you want to connect more with your coworkers and have a better relationship with them, you want to have better friendships, learn to love yourself more, and you'll have more love to give away because love is not a commodity like money. If you need more money, you can get a second job. Maybe you can take out a loan from a bank. You can maybe borrow money from a friend or family member. Theoretically, there's lots of ways to get money. Love is organic, it can only be grown within us.
Mm.
And so as it grows, we have more to give away. And so that self love is critical.
Okay, interesting point because there's so much about self-love at the moment, okay?
Yeah,
And I think there's a misunderstanding about it. And I like your version actually. What you're saying is if we can reflect love back to ourselves, let's just say, it can grow and we have more to give away. Is that what you're saying?
absolutely. And it's
Okay.
the only way to give away more.
Mhm.
Is to grow it within us and to love ourselves. To love ourselves more gives us the capacity to love others more. To have more compassion for ourselves gives us the capacity to show more compassion to others.
And this is not to be mistaken with selfishness.
It is absolutely not
Yes.
selfish,
Mhm.
and that is a. I'm glad you brought that up. That's a great misconception that's out there. Is that if I focus on compassion and acceptance and my own self worth, that I'm being selfish. That
Mm.
is absolutely not the case because it's the only way to give away more.
Right.
It's the only way to grow more, to more love within us in order to love our families, in order to love our friends, to appreciate and love our coworkers. The only way to do that is that self love. And so we actually, while again, it sounds good to say, well, I won't love myself because that would be selfish. I'll just love others.
Mm.
That sounds good. It just doesn't work.
Mm.
It has a certain logic to it, but it's a trap.
Mm.
When we learn to love ourselves, we actually have much more capacity to love other people. And there's nothing selfish about that.
Okay. People struggle with that. So
Hmm.
all of this was swimming. We were going along swimmingly. Here, this is where people struggle the most, I think. I think that
Hmm.
people are great with the rom-coms teaching people how to be emotional. Okay, some
Yep.
people struggle with that. Practicality, we all know that, one of the biggest reasons for divorce is not agreeing on financials and right? It's one of the
Right.
money. But the loving oneself, that's harder for people to do, it seems. So what are some techniques, ways that people can actually practice that?
Yeah. One of the biggest aspects of it is to appreciate your own value and to reflect on that. So often we're always just looking to see what other people are doing right or wrong. We need to look at ourselves and to value ourselves despite the mistakes that may have been made. This is not just an evaluation of whether you've done things right or wrong along the
Mm,
way,
mm,
because you've done both. That's
mhm,
just the human condition. But it's
mhm,
to understand our own value. And the way I think of it is this: imagine that I have in my hand a diamond
mhm,
that is the size of a baseball.
mhm,
It's a baseball sized diamond, perfectly cut, perfectly clear.
mhm,
what would that be worth?
Mm,
Obviously, it's priceless.
mm,
So let's imagine we take that priceless diamond, the size of a baseball, we go to a rural area of the country, we find a nice farmland area, and we roll it around in the muck and the mire and the cow manure. We bring it back in. How much is it worth now? It's still priceless if you know what it is.
mm,
And that's where people fall. We are of priceless value, of exquisite nature, but we live life.
mm,
And that rolls us around in the muck and the mire and the cow manure through our own mistakes and through what people do to us and just life in general.
mhm,
We get beat up along the way. We get stuff
mhm,
all over us. But that doesn't change our core value. It
mm,
doesn't change who we are as humanity.
mm,
And the purpose of self love is to understand that exquisite diamond underneath it all
mm,
and to value that and to
mhm,
understand that all the stuff on us doesn't define us. That's just stuff needs to be cleaned up. And
mhm,
that's what self development, that's what self improvement, that's what it's all about.
mm,
That's what counseling is about. That's what faith is about. That's what just nurturing ourselves. That's what health is about, is cleaning up all that stuff that has happened to us through our own mistakes and others in
right.
life. Clean that up and begin to see more and more our own exquisite value. And recognizing that is
Yes.
important.
Okay, great. I love all that. What's number 5?
The fifth one is passion. And this is a passion for life.
Mm,
This is remembering to enjoy the life we have. There's a lot of people that do the first four. The fourth one's tough. People struggle with that one. But even if you get that one right, sometimes we are doing so much as far as our emotional connections. We're doing the grind of life, that practical side. We're going to work. We're making good decisions. We're running the household. We're parenting. We're making good financial decisions. We're doing it all right. And then we wake up one day and we think, is this it? I'm working so hard at work. I'm working so hard at home. Is this really it? And the answer is no, that we were not, we were meant to do all of those things for a purpose of enjoying it. That we need to remember the key ingredient to passion, which is fun.
mhm,
We remember to have fun. Now, people push back on that and they say, no, wait, life is serious. Well, yes, that's why practicality is the third component of love. And yes, there are tragedies of life that are going to hurt. That's why grief is the first component. We don't forget those things, but let's also not forget about passion for life. This becomes the wind in our sails, the fuel in our engine. It's how we are really drawn to get up every day and enjoy the people we live with in our household, enjoy the people we work with at work, enjoy our friends as much as possible. It's not going
mm,
to be possible every minute of every day. People annoy us. That's okay. But look for the fun. If we can
mm,
laugh together, we're going
mm,
to build better relationships. And
right.
so, if you can grieve the hurts of life, you can stay connected with those you love.
Mhm,
If we can make good, practical decisions, we love ourselves so that we can love others, and we keep the passion of life, the fun, the enjoyment, you can build good relationships in every area of your life.
okay, I love all that. So this book is not just about love relationship. This is also a book about friendship and also probably for business people of how to manage people, right?
It is. It's for every aspect of life because, like I said earlier, obviously it's a very different relationship at work than
Mhm,
at home, but it's still the same five components. When you go to work, it's not always going to go well.
mm,
There's going to be huge setbacks. People are going to stab you in the back. That's a sad thing to say, and hopefully it doesn't happen very often, but it probably will happen at least once.
mm,
Or maybe that's too strong. People will make mistakes, and
yes.
they will hurt us in some way. So there's going to be a grief process. It's not the same grief process as a loved one dying,
Mhm,
but it's still a grief process. Maybe we lose a job, and we have to come back from that to stay engaged in our career. There's any number of scenarios that cause us grief.
mm,
We need to be emotionally connected with people at work. Not the same as at home, but appreciating the people we work with, that we're there side by side, we're in this together, and we're successful or we fail very often together. And so we appreciate them and we learn to have those connections. We make those good, practical decisions, communicating, making good, practical decisions, working together. We appreciate ourselves. We know our own abilities, we know what we bring to the table, and we know our own weaknesses.
Mm,
And that's okay. We know we have weaknesses. We can still love ourselves, appreciate our abilities as a professional, knowing that we need help sometimes.
mm.
And that makes us a better professional, knowing that we have weaknesses and understanding and loving ourselves in the good and the bad,
No matter what.
and having a passion for it,
Mm.
loving what you do and appreciating the people that you work with every day. That's the wind in our sails.
Awesome.
And so those 5 components work at work. They work in our jobs as well as at home.
Great. Okay. So thanks for running that all by us. What results have you seen? I mean, have you tested this with many people and taken them through this system? And if so, what are the results that have happened?
Yeah, I've talked to a lot of people over the years, and like I said, in capacity as a counselor, as a minister, in a number of different areas. One particularly stands out because this particular person was a little bit hesitant to come talk with me.
Hmm.
His wife kind of pushed him into it,
Mm,
and he was dealing with a lot of grief with a family member passing away, and he said, I feel like I already know what you're going to say.
hmm.
And I said, okay, tell me what I'm going to say. And he came through the kind of stereotypical counseling stuff you hear on television, which is usually not true.
Hmm.
And so I said, well, let me tell you what I'm actually thinking. And I talked to him about a lot of these things. And I said, does that sound like what you expected? And he said, no, but that's really helpful.
Okay.
And that's what I want people to know, that these stereotypes that we get into, that love and relationships are about luck, or it's just about some people have it, some people don't, or we just have to grind it out, or it's just
Mm,
about commitment.
mhm,
Commitment is a practical side, but it's not just about that,
mm,
or it's just about emotion. Emotion's very important, but it's not just about that. That fun is somehow a bad word. That all these things get into our mindset, and it's just not true.
mm,
And so I've seen so many people be able to uh, conceptualize love in this way, so they can begin to look and see, okay, well, I'm actually doing okay in these 1 or 2 or 3 areas, but I've wondered what's wrong.
mm,
And now I have the opportunity to look and say, well, actually, what's missing is component number 4,
mm,
or maybe it's number 3 or 5. That's a
mhm.
way of conceptualizing, so that we don't have love and relationships as a million moving parts of some mystery, but we can conceptualize love in these 5 components, so we can see exactly what's working pretty well and what's not working, and be able to work in that area. And one of the things I say when people say, well, how do I do that? What if I find something that's not working? How do I get it better? Everyone should be in counseling. Everyone should have a coach or a therapist or a counselor of some kind, so that you have someone to help you with the areas in which you're struggling.
But if they don't know your system, the counselors might
Yeah.
not be using your system and it might not be that helpful because you were just saying that it's the same old thing. So you're saying they'd
Yeah.
have to be counseling on the system for this to work, right?
I think this system could work, and I have counselors that have read my book in the self-published version. It's
Mm,
now been picked up by Morgan James Publishing and will be published next year. But I
mm,
had a self-published version. I've had some counselors say, I am using this.
mm,
I am recommending to my clients. I still think, even if they're not using this particular system, everyone should be in counseling,
mm,
because life's just too hard.
mm,
And if we understand this, we can go with the idea of, I need to work on grief,
mm,
and every counselor understands the idea of grief.
mm,
Or I need to work on, we can identify in the counseling process, go to the counselor and say, I read this book and I'm really struggling with this practical side of life. And
mhm,
so I need to
mm,
work on that. And so I think it's a tool that we can use to talk to a counselor, even
mhm.
if they're not familiar with this particular system.
Right. Now, you do know a lot of counselors and therapists are becoming coaches now because they feel like therapy is not working, right? So I'd love to hear your point of view because like we coach quite a few therapists that want to be
hmm
coaches because they're free then to actually coach. And a lot of them believe that the therapy model just doesn't work because it's stuck in the past, right? And they want to coach people for the future.
There are some aspects of counseling. Yeah, counseling, like a lot of professions, is evolving, and it
Mm,
needs to, and it's continually evolving. And yeah, I think there are more counselors that are moving into more of a coaching kind of communication than some of the old school counseling,
mhm,
and I think that's a good thing. I think
mm,
a lot of professions, we talk about, like in medicine, for example, we refer to doctors as practicing medicine.
Yes.
Because it's always changing and there's always things that we need to learn that are new and we need to adapt to those. We practice law because
Mm.
law is changing, and counseling is a very similar field. It's a
Mhm.
practice.
Mm.
And I often say that about my system as well. These 5 components of love, they are a practice. No one's going to get to a place where they declare victory over love. It doesn't
Mm.
happen. It's not something that we say, okay, I've done it. It's something we practice every day. We continue to practice throughout life because as life changes, we have to adapt to that. And yes, counseling as a profession is continuing to be a practice. It's
Mm.
continuing to be to communicate in new ways with new generations, and it is leaning more towards a coaching model because that's the communication style that people are hearing.
Right. Yes, and so it should. So, Mark, those the 5 elements are very interesting. I hope that people have learned from this. And what is one thing that you want to leave our audience with as far as like a mindset or a philosophy, or what's the last parting thought?
I want people to know that love is a learned skill set. And so, especially if you are discouraged at this point in your life because of dysfunctional relationship growing up, because of divorce, because of any situation in life, or even if your life is going pretty well, but you kind of wonder, what's wrong? Even though I got a lot of things to be grateful for, there's still something missing. Understand that love is a learned skill set, and we can learn parts of it and still be missing a little bit. But when we learn the fullness of the 5 components of love, you can build those relationships you want, even if you come from a difficult place. It's good news to know it's a learned skill set.
Great. Well, thank you for that. And I'll just mention the name of the book again. It's Learning Love, Building a Life That Matters, and Healthy Relationships That Last. And of course, we'll have the link to that in the show notes. Thank you so much, Mark, for turning up. And thank you, everybody, for listening. I hope you enjoyed this show. And we'll see you on the next one. Thank you for sharing and loving it. You're listening to the Business Wealth Impact Podcast, your source for empowering information and cutting edge ideas from the world's top minds. I'm your host, Jean Amlour, founder of 7-figure coaching company, Jean Amlour International. Join me on a journey to unleash your potential and create your highest success. Welcome to Business Wealth Impact.